What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today from across the pond, it is my podcasting cousin. He is the leader of the Taylor gang. It's the one and only Adam Taylor. How you doing today, Adam?
Yo, what's popping, man? I'm gonna be honest. I know I was on here with you and Seth Partnow the other day, but it feels like a while since we've just chopped it up, right?
It's funny, man. That same thought as I was going through the intro went through my head. Is like, man, it's been a minute. I know obviously we did that interview with Seth, like you said, but as far as just the two of us coming on here to chop it up, it's been a minute, man. Yeah, how's your summer going, dude? I mean, this is the off season. This is kind of what we're going to talk about throughout most of this podcast today is how to kill time in the off season. But how is the off season going for you right now, Adam?
Busy as shit, dude. I'm not even gonna lie. There's always something to cover. Obviously, I'm working with USA Today, so I'm hitting stuff for other teams as well. Still trying to focus on the Celtics, but let's be honest, there's not really much I can hone in on right now. I remember messaging Bill Sy from Celtics blog, like, dude, I don't
Bill
remember
Sy, the Celtics guy.
The Celtics guy did. I was like, I don't remember being feeling this disassociated from the team in the entire time I've been covering the team. It's just dead out here. There's no news. Any news you get is kind of non-news. Like, Brad Stevens goes on. What was he on? Toucher and Rich.
He was on. It was for the Jimmy Fun Marathon the other day. He was. I forget if it was on Toucher and Rich. It wasn't Toucher and Rich, but it was WEEI, whatever show he was on.
Somewhere, something, and it's the same stuff. It's an update about a non-update. Kristaps feeling good. Is gonna be back. Yeah, we knew this.
I mean, this is why we got so excited. What a week and a half ago when we heard, oh my God, they're gonna work out TJ Warren. That was real news for us to actually come on here and talk about. But that was we got 20 minutes out of it.
This is what I'm saying, right?
But nothing came of it though, right? Or at least it hasn't
on
yet.
Socials, I haven't really been there. There's nothing's popping, dude. It's just, it is what it is right now. But for somehow, I'm still filling 10 hours of work a day, and I just don't know how it's happening. How are you doing on your summer, man?
I mean, I'm good, man. I mean, I'm out here in Texas right now. We got a massive heat wave that's been going on all summer. I think it's starting to get people, a little loopy at this point. So I'm ready for some colder weather, and I'm ready for just like you said, just some more news, man. I mean, that's part of right now, at least. I've been waking up and trying to at different times try to catch a little bit of the FIBA World Cup because that's the closest thing to any real basketball. Now, there's no Celtics involved. Obviously, when Kristaps went down and Latvia is making a little bit of a run right now. They actually played pretty tough against Canada the other day. They're going to be moving on to the quarterfinal round. So, Latvia is making some noise, but Kristaps is there, but he's not playing. There's no other Celtics that are playing, but there are like a lot of ex-Celtics that you're seeing out there, right? You got Kelly Olynyk out there making some noise. You've got Dennis Schroeder and Daniel Tice in Germany. So there are some other Celtics to kind of keep an eye on. But, I'm kind of thankful for the World Cup because without that, it is a really, really dull part, at least in the States here. Adam, we do have football about to kick off, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are getting ready for to watch the Patriots. That's going to start about a week from Sunday. So that will give, at least those in Boston that are, into the NFL, which is a large portion probably of our audience with that crossover, that will give them something. But it's been tough these last couple of weeks if it weren't for the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the wrestling to watch and stuff. I'm big into that. But in terms of, I'm very career driven, very work driven in a way where I'm like, what can I do today to get some reach, to put the name out there, to put the show out there?
What's that 1% better you can do from the day before?
Exactly.
What's the one thing more? Yeah.
At the moment, I'm like, dude, there's a 0% I can do. I want to ask you though, you just mentioned the World Cup. We can get into today's topics in a moment, but this has been a debate for a few days. I've taken a very strong stance and I've gone backwards and forwards with multiple people. I've had to mute my notifications because of it. I can't remember who said it. You'll know the guy.
Noah Lyles,
who was. So you know where I'm going with
I know
this.
exactly where you're going. I actually meant to I was going to surprise you with this in the rundown. I didn't put it in our rundown today, but yeah, it was Noah Lyles, who is a USA track star, I believe, that made the comments you're about to allude to.
So, in your opinion, does winning the and it's fine if we disagree. Obviously, that's the beauty of this stuff. In your opinion, does winning the NBA qualify you to be called the world champion?
So I'll say this. I don't necessarily have a strong take on it either way. NBA players apparently had a very strong visceral reaction to this because almost universally they came out against Noah Lyles. Now, here's kind of my take on it is if you're just looking word for word, like, without applying certain context to it, of course he's right? It's the world. The world championships mean you should be playing. Everybody in the world has a chance to win this championship, and you are playing against, people and teams from other countries. So in that sense, like this is why I don't really care too much because I'm like, okay, I see what he's saying, and I don't think that's wrong. But I do see the other side of it where it's just different with, track and field than it is for something like the NBA. Like the NBA does host all of the top players in the world, which is what, we're going to talk about the FIBA World Cup here in a minute. This is part of what makes FIBA World Cup so cool is because you do see that when you take 3, 4, 5 NBA players, even if they're not, the top guys, and you give them continuity with guys that are high level basketball players that they've played with for a while, they're going to be competitive. They're going to, we saw a couple years ago, Team USA finished 7th in the FIBA World Cup. They're going to be able to beat the USA at this point if they're not sending the Jason Tatums, Kevin Durant's, Devin Bookers of the world. Like it's going to be competitive. USA's 3-0 right now in the current FIBA World Cup. But because all of those players do then matriculate to the NBA, and that's where all of the top guys do compete. Like in that sense, listen, that's where the top talent is. Like they're like as good as some of these other leagues have become around the world, whether it's the Spanish league where Luka Doncic came from, or the French league where Victor Wembanyama came from, and others that are in that second tier, third tier. They're not beating NBA teams like those teams. You know what I mean? Like Victor Wembanyama's team was barely beating and he lost to the G League Ignite, right? And they I forget if they won the championship or they lost in the championship of the French league, but that was one of the best teams, right? And they were right there with the G League Ignite team, which is not beating NBA teams. Maybe they'll get a game or two, but they're not winning a championship or a world championship. So in the context of where do all the world's best players compete, I can see the argument that, so in the NBA, you can call yourself a world champion because the world's best talent is in this league and in this league only. It's not spread out like it is in soccer in multiple different leagues. So that's kind of my take, is where I'm relatively indifferent. I can see both sides of it depending on how much you want to include certain layers of context. But I did think that it was funny. And I saw you, I know that you had the opinion that you had Noah Lyles side.
Yeah, I think that, I know one of the things I noticed was the argument was heavily predicated on US fans sided with like US players, like, hey, no, we have the best players, there's international players here. Whereas European fans, and I do think this is heavily influenced by the presence of soccer and the way soccer's built in terms of world champions or a World Cup winner. So I did see the disconnect there, and I did understand that some of that's through different structures within how the sport is played, like to be fair. But my outlook on it is 9 times out of 10, 99.5% of the time, an NBA team is going to beat any team in Europe, right?
Yeah.
But for me, if you want to be a world champion, you need to conquer different styles of play from around the world. Right, Spanish, like EuroLeague basketball is completely different. The rule sets are different. There's more defensive onus. You can stay in the paint. You can do all these other
tip the ball off the rim. Yeah. I mean, you see this in FIBA, right? There's a reason that Patty Mills, Dennis Schroeder, guys like Evan Fournier, they're middling to kind of questionable rotation guys in the NBA, and they come on FIBA and they got flames out their ass, right? Like,
because
a
lot of these
dudes are cooking, they're killing.
A lot of these guys grew up playing in that rule set. The NBA rule set is foreign to them. Now they're coming back to what they know, and they're playing a little bit more freely. But for me, if you want to be called the world champion, I'm not like, there's 2 ways to do this, right? You win the World Cup, you're a world champion. That's a national level. If you want to be a world champion at team level, at club level, depending on how you want to define each team, there needs to be like a world championship series where it's like the winner of the Spanish league, the winner of the French. Like you take your 5 to 6 best leagues and you just do a small tournament, and the winner of that is your world champion.
This is my question. Like, should the NBA with this new in-season tournament, which we haven't really talked too much about, and I'm going to be interested to see how it plays out in year one. But is this an opportunity for the NBA to make something like that happen? You know, I mean, obviously, you're doing it with the mixture of your regular season, so you got to kind of figure out how that works. But like, I think that's the only real way to do it, because you're not going to get these guys to come together, you know, after the season. But I do think there is a world in which, you know, let's just say Real Madrid, right? Which I believe was the team Luka Doncic played for before he was drafted. So let's just take a team like that. It's a high level team. Obviously, a lot of people will be familiar with them from soccer or from football. But like, let's take a team like that. That's super high level. They've been together for the most part, and they're going to have top tier talent. I think Nikola Mirotic was also on that team.
He was in Barcelona,
he was in Barcelona. But still, my point being, those teams are going to have a handful of guys that you might recognize from college ball or play in the NBA at some point. But they're going to have a lot of continuity. You know, they're going to have, sometimes, compared to, I mean, we see a lot of these super teams put together, that's their biggest flaw, right? They don't know how to play with each other, where a lot of these teams in Europe are going to have a little bit more continuity. So it is interesting to see, where does water find its level between talent, continuity, and then depending on which rule set you're playing on, right? And that's an interesting experiment. I think, like you said, more than likely, because the talent's going to be so heavy towards the NBA side, which is going to include a lot of top tier foreign guys. If we just left it as their NBA teams versus the Spanish league teams or the French league teams, it's 99.5% of the time going to go in favor of the NBA team. But that's kind of the answer to me, is like, if you're going to try to really make this, you know, soccer style tournament, like, let's get weird all the way with it, and let's start bringing in some of these foreign teams.
I mean, I'm just big on, like, hey, if you call yourself a world champion, you need to beat teams from around the world. It's all well and like, and you know, Greg Popovich, there's a quote floating around.
Yeah, he had that a couple years ago. Yeah,
and he was like, "Yo, we're playing a national league, including Canada. Okay, so we're playing a North American league.
Even then, Canada gets one representative.
You know what I mean? We're playing a North American league.
We don't have a Mexico City team. There's no, you know, there's not even a Mexico team that we have to represent.
Exactly. So. And then, like, you know, you're telling me that Real Madrid couldn't come in and beat the Detroit Pistons as currently constructed.
Well, so that's where I think it gets interesting, right? Is some of those bottom 5, 6, 7 teams that are typically young guys, inexperienced guys. You know, maybe there's a lack of continuity because, you know, you mentioned the Pistons, like, most of their core is going to be 3 years in the league or less, right? So they really haven't had that much time to gel, even just based on their age. And so I think that's interesting, but I don't know how because that's what I think would really be a fun, you know, experiment, is kind of, you take the bottom 8 teams in the NBA and you take the top 8 teams in the Spanish league and the French league and the Australian league or whatever, and you find a way to make that into a tournament. I don't know. I have no idea how the hell you do that. That's even so much more complicated than what we were suggesting, but I think that would be more interesting than, you know, a team like the Celtics that has 2 all NBA guys. And, you know, we just went through it with Seth Partnow the other day, has, you know, 7 of the top 125 players in the league. Like, that's not going to, number one, they're probably not going to care. And number two, if they do care, I don't think it's going to be very close. So I don't think that's nearly as fun, but I do think those bottom tier with that top tier, I think that could be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, it's just a thought exercise. And I understand that's like the argument itself. Like, I got quite heated because I'm like, everyone's like, no, you're not listening. I'm like, I am. But what I'm saying is, like, so it did get heated, but it was prime off-season content. I thought
that's what we're here for right now. This is the news that we have, and so let's take a quick break and let's keep talking about FIBA here, because we want to bring this into a topic that we did have planned today. So we'll bring this back here 1 second. Okay, Adam. So, you know, we're talking about the FIBA World Cup, and that's the only actual basketball we have going on, and, you know, USA just took down Jordan this morning as we're recording this here on a Wednesday, 110-62. They wrap up their group play 3-0, take down lefty Kobe aka Rondae Hollis Jefferson. Did you remember Rondae Hollis Jefferson before he's become kind of an internet, I don't want to say sensation, but certainly in in NBA X or NBA Twitter, he's definitely been popping around this last week or so with, looking a lot like Kobe out there. And it is kind of funny how much he looks like him. And he had a great tournament. Jordan's 0-3, but he had a great individual tournament. Do you remember much of him from his NBA days?
I mean, the name rings a bell. Like,
yeah.
It's not somebody that I was like, yeah, I hate RHJ's playing. I got to tune in. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was never like that, but it wasn't a name where I was like, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I knew who he was, but it's not somebody like I don't recall ever being like, man, he balled out in this game.
Yeah, he was always a guy that I kind of liked his game. He went to Arizona, so I remember him a little bit in college, and he just had good length, kind of a good, not necessarily a 3-and-D, actually kind of a funky shot, but always one of those guys that felt like he would find a way to contribute. I was surprised that he wasn't able to hang around the NBA longer. We'll see what happens after this run. He had a nice run in this, but what we wanted to talk about today is, we're going to take a little stroll into enemy territory to a certain degree. So, with Team USA, one of the big stories has been the play of Austin Reaves. Austin Reaves, obviously broke out this past season in the postseason and was super impressive. That vaulted him into a spot here on this FIBA World Cup team, and it seems to be full steam ahead. It feels like when it's him and Halliburton combined with Anthony Edwards, that's kind of a trio that the USA has relied on so far in the tournament to be difference makers, and some of them, including Halliburton and Reaves, are actually coming off the bench to make that impact. But Austin Reaves has been really impressive. And so Adam and I were chatting about what we're going to talk about today. And it started to make us think about, and this is what you do in the offseason. What if scenarios? So Austin Reaves was drafted in 2021. And when I say drafted, that was the draft class. He was undrafted. So he actually was never drafted. In that particular draft, the Celtics actually had pick 45, which they used on Juan Bangaran. And then actually the pick right after that is current Celtic, Delano Banton. So there's a lot of connections in that draft for the Celtics. Adam, think back. What do you remember, if anything, about Austin Reaves in that 2021 draft? We were scouting kind of the mid to late second because that's where the Celtics were picking at the time. Was that a name that you remember seeing pop around as a potential? Or, tell me.
Not at all. Like, I'm not really a big draft guy anyway because college ball's so difficult to watch out here. But obviously, you read up, you do. I remember there was a Chris Grennan report that the Celtics took him into a workout, and they worked him out really close to the draft. I think one of the important things to remember as well is that we found out recently when Reaves went on to All the Smoke was that the Detroit Pistons wanted to select him at 42, and Austin Reaves was like, "No, I don't want to play for you." And I think that had a huge impact as well on him not going to a team like Boston at 45. Because he'd just turned down an opportunity at 42 to go to a team where he could have got legitimate minutes on a rebuilding roster. So I don't remember much, but I do know that what I read about him at the time was he was talented, but in a way that not everybody was confident would translate to an NBA game.
So it's funny. I was thinking about this the other night, and I don't know if it was on an old Green with Envy episode or back when we were doing Splitting Time with Celtics blog. And remember Coach Spins? I think he was writing for Celtics blog at the time. Yeah. I don't know if he still is or not. I don't think he still is.
Yeah, he does. Just to give him a shout out, he does a really dope draft focused newsletter.
Yeah,
called the Box and One.
Okay, that's what it is. And I remember we had him on. We were doing like some draft day coverage, live stream. And I remember he was on, and he mentioned Austin Reaves as a guy that he was interested in for the Celtics. And the reason it stuck out to me is when you get that deep in the draft, I'm like you. I mean, I can talk to you. I don't watch as much college basketball as I used to, but I'll keep up with some of the top guys as we start to get towards March Madness, the tournament. And so, the top 15 to 20 guys, and then depending on where the Celtics pick is, I can talk to you about certain guys, that are in the top of the draft and then wherever the Celtics are picking. And with Austin Reaves, though, he initially went to Wichita State, then transferred to Oklahoma. And so that's in the Big 12. I live in Austin, Texas, University of Texas and Oklahoma. It's a big time rivalry. And so I don't think it was COVID year. So I don't think I was at the game, but I think I was at home watching the game on TV. And Austin Reaves just stood out in that game. And so to the point that you just made a minute ago, he gave me like Hooper vibes, like in the sense that if you were at the local Lifetime Fitness or at the park, I don't know what this guy is specifically good at when I watched that game, but I know that his team was going to be successful. He was going to find a way, somehow, some way, whether it was him scoring the ball, it was him distributing the basketball, it was him getting in the lane and making the hockey assist so that it sets up everything else for your team. It just felt like that guy had a very positive energy to him on the basketball court, and that stood with me. I was like, okay, I don't know what this guy is, but he's something. There's you know how you sometimes you can't always pinpoint it the first time you watch a guy, but you're like, there's something to this guy. Don't know what it is, but it's very clear that he was in control of a game that had, multiple athletes who were, looked at as higher prospects than him. He was the one that kind of stood out as the one that set the pace of the game and was in control of the game. And so I thought it was interesting. I certainly never, ever thought we'd be where we are now, that he is, basically if you're looking at big threes around the league, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and Austin Reaves has to be considered a pretty damn good big three. And that's really what he would be at this point, and only entering his third year in the league.
So then you got to ask yourself this, and I'm writing about this at the moment for Celtics blog. Sorry. The question I'm asking is for myself: if the Celtics drafted him at 45, given how much talent was there in that guard rotation, given how much talent's in that guard rotation now, does he still become the Austin Reaves that we're seeing right now, or does his development get like literally glass ceilings? Because the Celtics have a very poor record outside of Sam Hauser of developing talent in the G League to move up and take a spot in the starting lineup. Because I don't think there was a world where Reaves comes in at 45 and gets a position in the start, like in the primary rotation from jump.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably too crowded, right? Because at that time to get into that backcourt, well, I mean, I guess actually it's tough, right? Because like you said, there's not a great record of the Celtics being able to turn those two-way guys other than Sam Hauser to this point into something. But Sam Hauser was something that they really kind of narrowed it on. It's like, we need this. We need that three-point shooter. I've been begging for a three-point specialist for this team for several years. And so they were able to finally kind of zone in or lock in on that type of guy. But if you look at the backcourt for the Celtics at that time, I'm trying to think right now, obviously that would have been 2021. So that would have been what? Smart, Schroeder, who else really? Jaylen Brown, obviously, if you're considering him in the backcourt. I mean, you could say there's a role at the end of the bench, but for him to actually crack real playing time, I think that would have been really tough. And that was also Ime Udoka's first year as a coach. Yeah. So it's really tough for him to say he's gonna put his hat
was
on.
already there as well.
Pritchard was already there as well. That's right. So it's hard to say that all of a sudden Ime is gonna say, "Hey, listen, first year as a coach, I'm gonna take this undrafted two-way guy and he's getting minutes in my rotation." Like, that's really tough. When you were the Lakers in that situation where your team was trash and you were falling all over yourself.
Like, that was the biggest problem. Sorry to cut you. That was the biggest problem for the Lakers. They were old and they needed an influx of young guys.
Desperate for an influx of some type of youth that they could help, and cheap youth that they could help them propel. And then, I mean, obviously they struck gold. I don't think they ever expected what they're getting from Austin Reaves or what he developed into last season. And now it'll be interesting to see what happens, because this upcoming year, there's going to be expectations. The guy's out here dating Taylor Swift and he's in LA. You don't think there's going to be a fucking spotlight on that? Like, there's going to be a massive
Is he actually
spotlight.
dating Taylor Swift?
I don't know. Did you see the clip that was going around the other day where it was, he was at some event, was asked if he was single. He said no. And I think he's been linked to Taylor Swift, but that's that LA shit, right? That's LA vibe. That's Austin Reaves, LeBron James, Taylor Swift go to dinner. Like, that's you know what I'm saying? Like, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But the rise that he has had in a very quick span, it's just super impressive. So it's hard not to ask yourself the question of what if. But then again, every team in the league, because he went undrafted, every single team in the league could have this conversation that you and I are having right now.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got to credit he turned down opportunities to enter the league via the draft. Like, second round it's a crapshoot, because you're not getting a guaranteed deal. You're most likely going to a G League team for the first year. You're going to be majoritarily down in the G League, and you've got to claw and fight your way up into an NBA roster spot. He saw an opportunity in Los Angeles. I don't know if you've watched this episode of All the Smoke, but he knew there was an opportunity to be straight in their main roster in that rotation. He knew that. He knew he'd have a better chance going undrafted and signing a rookie scale deal there.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, once you get to a certain point in the draft, and 42 is, I think, probably somewhere around the time where this starts to make sense. Like, why not control your own destiny a little bit, right? Because like you said, like the pay, if you end up making a roster, it's not guaranteed in the second round, and like it's not going to be that big of a gap. And now you can kind of see what's a better fit for me, not just this team saying, let's try it out and see what happens. But now you can at least say, all right, I might have 2 or 3 options to come in as an undrafted guy, play in summer league, make their training camp, and then be able to make at least a 2-way spot. So you give yourself, and this is where, I've heard him talk about it before, where he was already thinking, man, I think my IQ really matches with LeBron's IQ, which, by the way, that's some fucking confidence to come in as
ridiculous confidence
as a 21, 22-year-old. Like, hey, you know who I think my game really meshes well that would enjoy playing with me? Oh, maybe just LeBron James.
Yeah, the best player on the planet, one of the best players in history, depending on whether you subscribe to Bron or Jordan. Yeah. I'm just gonna be like, hey, Bron, me and you, we're him.
Hey, IQ buddies? Wouldn't it be IQ buddies? Yeah, let's do it. And
it's not even like we're him, we're he. We're he's.
I mean, it's worked out. So it's a super big credit to Austin Reaves. But this is where I think, it's so fascinating to me, the world of drafting prospects and scouting. It's so hard. That is such a hard game, which is why I think when you see a lot of these mega trades and so much of it's based around draft picks, that's great. You're going to have more cracks at it, but you better get that shit right, man. And that's why when you see Nikola Jokic going in the 40s, you see Austin Reaves going undrafted, and it's easier at the top, but ask the Kings, who it took them until this year to get out. They almost didn't make the playoffs for 20 years, and they picked a whole bunch of times in the top 10.
I always say this: you can sell somebody on the dream far easier than you can sell somebody on the reality. So it's always easier to get to put picks in a deal to make it seem sweeter than it would be to put an actual player in, because the dream's still there. We could find this guy. This guy could be at the franchise guy in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're like, here's Aaron Nesmith, a former lottery pick from 2-3 years ago, everyone's like, yeah, but no. That's not enough. First round draft pick, unprotected. Don't know where it's going to land yet. Don't know who's going to be a star of that draft class. Yeah, that's perfect. Give me 10 of those, 50 years down the line, and we're good.
And this is where Danny Ainge deserves a lot of credit, retroactively, is, he nailed the Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum picks. Those were all great picks.
Nailed them.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, especially, obviously, I think Tatum and Brown stand out the most. Brown, because it wasn't a lock that he was the guy to go at number 3. So that was a bit of a gamble. And then obviously Tatum, you traded down from 1 to 3 to go get him.
And then he got the role players. He went and got Grant, who turned into a really good
That's what I'm saying. Even Grant, Pritchard, we all like Pritchard. The NBA likes Pritchard. Stevens was talking high about Pritchard the other day from that radio spot that we were talking about. So, I think Danny Ainge, because he missed on, Gabe Pruitt or I never understood the Celtic fan rhetoric that Danny Ainge couldn't draft, because he got the biggest ones right. And then he also found some guys at the back end of the draft when it's a total crapshoot. Yeah. So it's, you know what I mean? So I just think that part of the NBA and like forming a team, building a team, it's so difficult to do. And you've seen so far, Brad Stevens has kind of said, I'm good on that, man. I'm going to find other ways to build this team. I don't need that criticism.
Yeah. Brad Stevens is like, who needs draft picks? Like, he's like, you know how hard it was for me when Danny just kept drafting guys, didn't have a clue who they were. I'm just gonna trade every one of them.
Yeah, I'm just gonna trade everybody and get known commodities in here, and then we'll figure it out. But let's use that to actually transition a little bit, because the next thing that we want to talk about was a clip that came out from JJ Redick's podcast, Old Man and the Three. I don't know if this, as we're recording, I believe this episode is either dropping today or tomorrow, featuring Rajon Rondo, obviously Celtic legend, Celtic favorite. And it's a really interesting clip, which we're going to play here in just a second. So actually, let's go ahead and cue that up right now. Let's play this, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
with me, when I'm playing the game, I'm not necessarily playing against a player. A great example is when I was going against the Celtics when I played for the Bulls. My whole mindset that entire series was to beat Brad Stevens. A quick story. I know I'm jumping around, but I think it was game one. It was like a shoot around in the ballroom. We stayed in the hotel. We were at the Four Seasons, and I asked Jimmy and D-Wade to stay back. And I was working on fourth quarter execution plays that we could run in the fourth that Brad hadn't seen us play yet. So when we did run those plays, they weren't able to make those counters or adjustments. And for me, I was watching I think I watched maybe like 4 or 5 of his games to where his fourth quarter plays, they were calling sets that they ran for Isaiah Horford in that particular series to get ahead of the curve. Because I'm thinking, my mindset is thinking, how can I beat the coach? How can I outcoach the coach? I feel like I have the power and I'm involved in the game. So I have more of an influence and an impact that I can make versus a coach yelling from the sidelines, trying to communicate to his players what they need to do. But me as a player on the court, I'm able to make those adjustments and be ahead of the curve.
But to be honest with you, that's one of the best answers that I've ever gotten on that question. Now looking back, you really are a cocksucker, because that's essentially what you were doing. I'm getting these memories of the 2009-2010 playoffs and looking over at you, whether it was a free throw, a dead ball, whatever, and you just be like staring at Stan.
I'm never going against the players. I'm looking at the coach and what he's saying, because everything obviously he's saying that you guys are going to do and implement what he wants to do in practice. So if I can get ahead of those answers to the test earlier, I'll ace the test. And this crazy thing, we were in a bubble. This goes back to the bubble. Me and Brown were in the bubble. We were watching the game. I think it was Miami and Boston again. And we were sitting in the room watching the game. And like I said, it went down to the wire. So Brown's like, if we get Miami, I got Spo. And if we get Boston, you got Brad. So that was kind of our mindset. It's like, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to beat the Heat or we're going to beat the Celtics. It was more so, if we can outcoach or, if we can outcoach or outplay the coaches on that staff in particular, which 2 guys we felt that we knew pretty good, we were going to win.
So another guy, Adam, that fits into our Austin Reaves conversation of on the same IQ level as LeBron James, Rondo, Reaves, and LeBron, of course, the big 3. But no, I think this is such a fascinating club. But I'm very excited for this full pod drop. Might be out by the time you're listening to this right now. But let's start here talking about this clip. I want to go back to, because as we're queuing this up to be part of the podcast today, I went back and I looked at that Bulls Celtics series that Rondo mentions at the very beginning. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but this is the IT run, right? This is the IT team that makes the run to the conference finals, has the tragedy with his sister, the 50 plus point game he had against the Wizards and all that. And the Celtics probably weren't making it out of that first round if Rondo doesn't get hurt in that first series. They were up 2-0. The Bulls were up 2-0 as an 8 seed. And all I can remember, I went back and looked at the box scores. I didn't go back and watch the games, but I still remember vividly, like, holy shit. And this is the time when it felt like Rondo's career was dwindling, right? Like, Rondo is like, man, he's been on 7 teams at this point since he left the Celtics. Like, still love Rondo, but I don't know what his career is going to ultimately look like. And in those first 2 games, his stat lines weren't the 21 points, 17 rebounds, 19 assists that we saw, in some of his, prime Celtic days, but he was 12, 9, and 7, whatever. But I just remember he controlled so much of those games. And now you hear him talking about how he was trying to outcoach the coach. And I'm like, damn, that kind of is what felt like was happening in that particular series. And then once he goes out, Celtics come back, end up winning the series 4-2 after being down 2-0. But if Rondo's in that series, it's a huge ripple effect, more than you would think, across the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, Rondo was the floor general during that series, and everyone knew playoff Rondo was a real thing. I remember vividly just my being on socials the day after the first 2 games, and everybody just being like, "Man, Rondo's destroying us. We need, Rondo is the reason we're down 2-0. Rondo gets injured, the news breaks, everyone's like, the series is over, the Celtics going to win, and they're going to sweep them now 4-2. Next 4 games are for Boston. By sweep, I mean 4 straight wins, obviously not 4-zip. And it was clear that Rondo was the guy that was the glue. He's a high IQ guy, high facilitation guy. In terms of, I don't know why I said high facilitation, like that's actually a genuine term. You know what I mean? He controlled the game, controlled the pace, but not only that, he's the one that calls the sets because he's the one that brings the ball down the floor. And Brad wasn't as, what's the right word to use? He wasn't as, he didn't have the experience of coaching in the playoffs that he did towards the latter years. So he didn't understand how to shut down a guy like that quicker, how to scheme him out of a game. Brad was still learning at the time as well. I've just broke something somewhere.
So I mean, the other part was that, I mean, that team just wasn't that talented, right?
No, of course
we love
not.
that team. I mean, I was looking at
They
some
had no
of
business
their.
being there.
Yeah, I mean, the starting lineup is, you know, I'll just read through it here. It's Isaiah Thomas and Avery Bradley in the backcourt. Love my guy Avery. I was a huge Avery Bradley fan. We got Jay Crowder, Al Horford, and Amir Johnson. Like, that was the majority of the starting lineup. Now, of course, Marcus Smart, Kelly Olynyk coming off the bench. This is Jaylen Brown's rookie year. Gerald Green at a certain point gets inserted into the starting lineup as well. So, but even still, like, that's not a conference finals team. You don't read those names and go, oh yeah, that was the one seed.
I will say this though,
finals team.
Amir Johnson controlled the glass like a monster for that entire run, dude. Like, IT obviously was the hero of that run, but Amir Johnson was a really big part defensively. Avery Bradley gave you the great point of attack defense. Marcus Smart, clearly. It was a good team. It wasn't a conference finals team. And to be honest with you, I don't think anyone would have been too shocked had Rondo stayed healthy if the Bulls had gone on and won that series. I don't think it would have been a huge, like, earth-shattering
here's the ripple effect, the biggest ripple effect from the series. If Rondo stays healthy, if the 8-seeded Bulls, who had Jimmy Butler, Dwayne Wade on his last legs, really the last time we ever saw Dwayne even close to anything that resembles Dwayne Wade, and you think about it, if the Bulls win that series, do the Bulls then become more likely to hang on to Jimmy Butler? Do they pay Jimmy Butler instead of trading him? Because this was Jimmy Butler's last appearance as a Chicago Bull. That offseason at the draft, he gets traded
to Minnesota. Right?
Yeah, to Minnesota. So, you know, and part of their reluctance was they weren't sure if Jimmy Butler was the true number one. Now, obviously, we've seen that's been a mistake, and the Celtics have firsthand witnessed Jimmy Butler be that dude, be Himmy Butler. And so you wonder what happens, right? This is another part of us kind of like wondering what would have happened if the Celtics maybe took a chance on Austin Reaves. What happens here? Because the Celtics also, and this is another thing that's come up, is the Celtics had opportunities to trade for Jimmy Butler, but they would have had to give up Jaylen Brown and what eventually became probably the Jason Tatum pick, you know, and so they didn't. But like, I wonder if Jimmy Butler had beat the Celtics, does Danny Ainge feel differently? Like, shit, man, that guy just beat us. Like, why not go give them Jaylen Brown, who we don't know at this time? Remember, you got to like think from the moment of when this is actually happening. We didn't know Jaylen Brown was going to be Jaylen Brown, highest paid player in NBA history. Like, that would have, you would have been taking crazy pills if you had said that after year one. Could he have still been a good player? Of course, but we had no idea what Jaylen Brown was going to become. Excuse me. We didn't know where that pick was. And we just talked about, it's a crapshoot, right? Drafting is a crapshoot. You know, the Sixers took Markelle Fultz. If they took Jason Tatum, they have Jason Tatum and Joel Embiid right now. Like, there's so many different things that could happen. So it wouldn't have been, if Jimmy comes in and beats you, it's a lot easier to then say, you know what, I'll give you Jaylen Brown and this, you know, a couple of our picks. We had a bevy of picks still. Give you some of these picks, and you give me Jimmy Butler, and now I have Isaiah Thomas, Jimmy Butler, Jay Crowder, Al Horford, you know, whatever's left over, Marcus Smart, you know, and now you're looking at a team that's, you know, probably at least in that time, in that moment, is closer to competing for a championship than, you know, what you were going to have, you know, just holding on to your stuff. And it's a lot easier to justify if that guy just beat your team.
Isn't this the same year that they flipped IT as well at the end?
At the end, yeah. So this would have been that
imagine.
Yeah.
So you can argue that, hey, not only do we trade for Jimmy Butler, but we still flip IT for.
I mean, that's potential for Kyrie or
for
whatever.
Kyrie, and now all of a sudden you've got Kyrie, Himmy, you've got Horford, Marcus Smart still there. It's a completely different makeup of the team,
right.
But the window's so much shorter that we're probably covering a rebuilding team again right now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a complete crapshoot as to what would have happened after that.
Isaiah's hip never gets as bad because he doesn't have to play through so much additional.
Well, he's out in the first round in this scenario, so he definitely doesn't
gets
have
the surgery,
that
has
hip
more
injury.
time to heal.
Well, the hip injury happened later in the postseason, didn't it? Or I guess it was.
I thought he was dealing with it from the All-Star break, and then
it might have been, yeah. Or it doesn't get as bad is the point, and that maybe it's it's corrected more, and then we just kind of lean into, all right, IT's our guy, and now we've got IT who's tough as nails with Jimmy Butler who's tough as nails, and we've got Jay Crowder. There's so many different things that could have happened. So it's one of those weird moments that doesn't seem influential, but actually could have been really influential in the way that we look at the NBA now, 6-7 years later down the road.
And there's no guarantee that Chicago make the deal to move backwards to pick up Tatum. They might go straight for Fultz.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As you said, there's the butterfly effect's real, man. There's so many what ifs that happen and so many doors that may not open, or, maybe. Was that the Lonzo Ball year as well? Or am I getting confused?
I'd have to go back. It might be.
Same year. Wasn't it
Lonzo Ball's the same year as Tatum?
He went third, right?
Yeah, it would be.
Lonzo could have ended up in Chicago on draft night. You just don't know.
You never know. And so that leads us to this question I'm curious to answer here before we take a quick break and get to our last segment. Rondo, he talks a lot about playing against the coaches. Rondo as a head coach. Give me your take.
Probably better than Joe Mazzulla.
Damn. Joe's on his off day catching a stray.
I'm just shooting from the hip. I wouldn't say no. I think that one of the things I'm very big on is learning from some of the established coaches. I think the way Ime did it, the way Chauncey Billups has done it, where you spend a few years under some really established veteran coaches, Ime did it the best. Going under Greg, and then he was on Steve Nash's team, Steve Nash's Nets team. Is that right? Or was it before Steve Nash went to Brooklyn?
You're talking about Ime?
Yeah.
I'd have to look it up. I don't know.
But he was under some established coaches. Then he kind of took a step up to be like a lead assistant for a less established coach, and then became a head coach. Then fucked it up, and now he's getting a second chance. Chauncey Billups is the same. I'd like to see Rondo do that, take a job on a staff with I think Rondo joining Spo's staff in Miami would be fantastic. Spend a few years under Spo, develop, and then move on to a bigger role, and then eventually become a head coach. Now, the question you've got to ask is, would you have him as future Celtics head coach?
I mean, certainly, if and when that ever becomes a potential option, a lot of fans would love to see that. I think Rondo with the media would be fascinating in a way that, I think Mazzulla's robotic and still not sure he's a human. We'll find out this season. I think Rondo, I think he'd get a little testy, to be honest, with the media, and I think it would make for a lot of good clips. I think it'd be very interesting to see how that would play out. I mean, I would love to see it. I will say this on Joe Mazzulla's behalf. One thing that the offseason has allowed me to do is become more hopeful and optimistic for year 2 Joe Mazzulla. I do think
only because he's got new coaches around him that are going to keep him grounded.
Well, he's got new coach. He's just set up better for success. I really do think.
That's
and
fair.
I was thinking about this the other night, is when we were doing our picks for the season. It was right after, we were doing it right before the opening game. And I think it was just me and Greg at the time. And I remember saying, he stuck with it. Celtics going to the finals and playing the Nuggets. And I pivoted to the Bucks. Obviously, ended up being the Heat, but I pivoted to the Bucks. And my reasoning was, at some point, this, losing your head coach the night before training camp. And then plus at that time, it was within a week span. It was the Robert Williams news. It was Danilo Gallinari was out. So it was within 3 weeks, there was all three, things come in threes, right? And so those 3 things all happened. And I just remember saying, it has to matter at some point. And then, of course, that goes straight out of my mind when, we start 21-4 and you see Tatum playing at an MVP level for stretches of the season. Jaylen Brown made second team all NBA. And you're like, man, this team has it. We can do it. Even though it was, frustrating up and down. And then you did see that eventually, hey, what did matter? Not having stability, not having the off-season coordination and planning that, that a guy who's 34 years old was the same. He should be on this podcast, not coaching the Celtics. You know what I mean? At 34, that guy should be with us doing what we do, not leading one of the greatest franchises in U.S. sports, to try to take them in a
just in sports
situation, just in sports. Yeah. Trying to lead them and I get why he was like, hey, I don't want to rock the boat. Let me just try to influence offense. Defense is there, but it's not, it was just a really shitty situation. So I've gotten to the point where I'm totally on board with giving Joe a full second chance without trying to bring in bias of how I felt last season, because it really was unfair when you think about his scenario. And so to that, I wish him success, but if it's not, Rondo's a hell of an interesting choice. Rondo would be fascinating to come in. And, I do think a lot of times it's point guards and role-playing point guards. And, Rondo certainly has a really interesting perspective on the game because he was elite, as far as multi-time all-star was, I believe might have been an all-NBA. I'd have to double check if he made an all-NBA team or two. And then he kind of became a more role player. You saw who he was on the Lakers that won the championship in the bubble, where he talked about him and Bron were scouting coaches. That's a very different Rondo than the Rondo that was in the 2010 NBA finals, that was in the 2012 conference finals, dropping 40 plus points. And so he has a very unique perspective. And I think that would make him a really, really good and interesting coach, especially getting to hear this insight from him in this interview.
Do you know what else I'd like to see? It's never going to happen, but it's something that I'd really, really enjoy. Is Paul Pierce giving a speech at a championship parade about the website where he can rent a girlfriend for a day. Just on a duck boat with a big ass fucking boombox and a speaker, and a microphone. Like, this is, I don't know, Crystal. I rented Crystal for the day. This is the website. Like, go get yourself.
Paul Pierce is the dude that it's like, I know in Seinfeld, there's an episode where Kramer talks about, have you ever met a proctologist? If you ever meet a proctologist, park yourself next to them because they've got the craziest stories. Nobody ever wants to admit what got stuck in their butt, right? So he's like saying the proctologist is always, Paul Pierce is the proctologist of the NBA. Who knows what stories Paul Pierce has? He's the guy that you want to smoke a joint with or have a drink with, park yourself next to, and just see what the hell comes out of his mouth. That's who Paul Pierce is in NBA circles.
He's got to be one of my favorite, just wild cards.
Absolutely wild card. All right, Adam, let's take one more quick break here, and then we got one more segment we want to wrap up with. All right, so this is the last segment that we wanted to do here because, well, it's the off season and it's what we do. So we're gonna do this kind of rapid fire here. We're gonna give you two things that we love about the off season, and then one thing that we hate about the off season. And Adam, let's go love, hate, love, so that way we end on a positive note. So give me one thing that you do love about the NBA off season.
So the off season for me, and I'm going to do this in terms of Celtics moves, additions and non-additions and stuff. So I love the fact that they added some new coaching staff that have veteran voices that have NBA experience. That's one thing that I truly love and I'm excited for coming into the new season.
So I kept mine a little bit more general, but certainly applies to the Celtics. But free agency and hot stove trade season, I just love that shit, man. When you get the rumors going, and when you get Shams versus Woj versus Chris Haynes poking his head in every now and then, I think that stuff is fascinating because it comes so quickly, so hot and heavy, and then immediately you're kind of left with, what does this mean? How do I feel? And then there's always, I love that there's an instant reaction, like Marcus Smart, Kristaps Porzingis. Like, it hurts. I'm excited, especially when you throw in there was another trade that was supposed to happen, then it became this trade. And so it's this influx of emotions. It just makes for really great conversation. And so I think the more that with the offseason, when you're left with this kind of theoretical debating, you can't have a wrong answer, right? Because if someone wants to tell you, hey, I don't think this was a good move because Marcus Smart was the, signature player on this team. He's our hustle. He's our identity. And now we're trading it for a 7-foot guy that, 2 years ago in Dallas, people were writing off and now he's injured again. Like, I don't think that's a great move. Or you have the other side where it's like, I love the talent. Look at this. We have so much more talent. We're so long. We can shoot the ball. We can defend the rim. We can get what Marcus Smart, he's hitting the down. He's on the downside of his career. You could see some slips and, a few cracks in his game over the last year or two. Like, this was the right time to sell. And you know what? Both of those might be right. We don't know. But I think you can make both of those arguments. And it makes, I think that part of the offseason generates really genuine and great conversation, because I think there's different ways to see it, and you can both be right and you can both be wrong, but you can always have like a really nuanced conversation around it.
That's fair. I think that, we definitely saw that with the Smart Porzingis trade. I think we see that with most trades, but you have to be in a fan base to really understand where both sides are coming from. It's really easy for us to sit here and be like, hey, Minnesota traded Jimmy Butler and we think this is great for this, or it's not, whereas the Timberwolves fans are probably like, what the fuck? Or thank fuck, depending on which side of the fence they sit on, So I like sitting back and watching how other fan bases react to trades more than being part of the fan base that's reacting to a trade. Does that make sense? Because I feel like you get a better grip of how teams view players when you're looking at people that have been moved on, and you look at how their fan base is. So you get to see other fan bases sad or happy. That tells me a lot about how much they valued ingoing and outgoing guys.
Yeah, 100%. You see who the role players are. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that, like, Grizzlies fans felt that way about Tyus Jones, or whoever it might be. So it can kind of surprise you. Let's go to what we hate about the offseason here. Like I said, let's do love, hate, love. I always want to try to end on a positive note here, but hate, and they're starting to pop up again now just because there's not much going on. I cannot stand summer workout videos. Of that dude, of Ben Simmons is one popping around now, or whether it's Rudy Gobert shooting threes, and obviously these are two guys that I just don't really enjoy in general. But there's a bunch of guys that you'll see videos of stuff they just don't do in games, and it's like, okay, cool. Like I don't know, man. And like just the Lifetime Fitness runs, like, and I think part of it's the aggregation of those clips where it's like, Cole Anthony's going to be on a whole new level this year. Nah, dude, he's fucking hooping at Lifetime Fitness. That dude should be shitting on everybody. Like he should be killing them. I don't care if there's one or two other, pros in there. The rest of those guys aren't pros. Like that dude should be hooping. Like, I've played in a couple leagues out here in Texas with guys that used to be D1 players. Like one guy played on Chris Paul's like Wake Forest team way back in the day. Another dude played on Jimmer's BYU team. And you know what? They were the best dudes in the gym because they played D1 basketball. These dudes are current NBA players. Like they should be incredible. I mean, Peyton Pritchard just dropped 61 points, in a pro-am. Like those dudes should be absolutely murdering non-pros. So I think it's more the aggregation, because then that just fills up the timeline of, oh my God, look at this. And it's all like the whole bunch of nothing is what I'm trying to say.
So I think while I agree with yours, the one thing that irks me more is lists. Like it fucking drives me insane. Give me the top 10 players in the NBA right now, and then 7 of them are wings.
Have you not been enjoying me and Greg's top 5 list?
See, that's different because but no. I'm not a list guy, but it's definitely an off-season thing. But it's like, I think that it's so much. I like them when they're broke down to position, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's nuance there. You can have a nuanced conversation with genuine discussion based around the top 5 point guards in the league. When you ask me the top 10 players in the league overall, I think that things start to get a little bit more difficult in that 7 to 10 range, because the guys on 11 to 15 also have a claim. And role, playing style, situation all play a factor. Whereas if you're just like, give me the 5 best bigs, that's fine. We can have that discussion. It's great. I also don't like, just in general, off-season social media, because it is very much like, here's the same clip of Jason Tatum dunking on LeBron for the millionth year in a row, and all we've done is put a different track over the top of it. Everybody, I know you're going to love this. No, motherfucker, I'm not, because I've seen it a million times. It's probably somewhere in my camera reel if I just scroll through my phone. I don't
feel like the tagline on those is always, people forget. It's like, did they forget? I don't know.
Or like, this is my favorite moment from Tatum's career so far. And I'm like, dude, if that's your favorite moment, you are fucking not watching enough Jason Tatum, because the dude does shit like that all the time. He done one dunk earlier this year, and I don't remember who it was against, but he just drove the lane and like single-handed.
Jared Allen. It was against the Cavs.
And then
funny
he turned,
enough, against the Cavs. I think it put the game into overtime, or it put it to double overtime or something like that.
And then in the media room, they're like, how come you, like, what made you do that? And he's like, sometimes you just got to remind people that you're capable of doing things like that. Like, to me, that was a I'm him moment. But everyone's like, no, he did it on LeBron. So
I mean, that is impactful doing it on LeBron as a rookie. But I'm with you. I don't need to see the clip over and over every summer just to say, don't forget Jason Tatum. Like, I mean, we know Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum's had a lot of highlights since then. But I understand your point, right? It's just summer social media is very, very tough. It's a rough landscape, even when things are
and I'm online. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm on like more. I've got a window open constantly, Instagram and Twitter, because it's part of the job. I see this shit. I see these stupid debates. Is LeBron's better than Jordan because of this? No. Jordan's better than LeBron because of this. How about they're just both top 2 and we just leave it at that?
We can call it a day and move on. Yeah, I know. I'm with you. Like, I think those type of debates are so played out that I don't really have an interest in any type of coverage like that. So I think we're on the same page when it comes to that. Let's end this on a positive note here. Let's give one more thing that we each love. I'll go first here because we've kind of touched on it with this episode. Is perspective. I love that the offseason gives us a chance to look back on that series, the Bulls Celtics in 2017. Like, we can actually look at that and be like, man, that was pretty crazy when you think about, Rondo and D Wade on his last leg, Jimmy Butler before he goes, what that all could have meant. And then you hear Rondo talk about how he was trying to strategize against Brad Stevens. I know our guy, Esbar he and I were kind of going back and forth. He had a clip from that Celtics Raptors series in the bubble. I forget why it got brought up at one point, but that series was freaking awesome. You forget how awesome some of these things are because in the moment they all happen so quickly, right? And so, I was at Game 7 for Jason Tatum versus Philly, and then by the time I'm on a flight back to Austin talking with you guys, we're talking about being down 3-0 4 days later against the Miami Heat. And it's like, it's almost like out of sight, out of mind. And now 3 years from now, I'm going to be like, man, that was freaking unbelievable being at the Garden with Jason Tatum dropping 51 points in a Game 7. But, because things happen so quickly in the moment, you don't have time to look back and really think about how cool it was or what that meant or what could have been. And I think the offseason allows for that. And so that's one thing that I do enjoy is just that breath to take a step back and think about, I enjoy, we've gone through several what if scenarios in this podcast, but just the way that things work out and what it, how the past influences the present and the future. And so I think that's something that the offseason is really cool that it does allow you to do that in the season. As soon as something cool happens, we're on to the next game, potentially the next night, or we're looking ahead to, whatever the next big matchup is. And you got to really be, in the moment. I like that step back that the offseason allows.
So I'm on the opposite. So I'm on the exact same page as you, but just the next page over where one of the things I love is the excitement, right? The what if, I'm excited to see Kristaps play. I'm excited to see Kristaps and how he fits with Tatum and Brown. I'm excited because the Celtics have another genuine chance to be a championship team. I'm excited because every year somebody pops as a new star in the league or takes that next step. Who's it going to be? I'm excited because, and then you go through these kind of iterations, right? And like you fucking pumped. And then, as you say, come opening night the next day, bear with me. Talking of international teams playing against NBA teams, the Mavericks will play Real Madrid via a press release from the NBA.
There we go. We got our wish all within one podcast. Speak it into existence.
But so for me, it's the build up, it's the anticipation. You know what I mean? Especially for when you're a big time fan of a single team and there's so many changes that have been made through the summer. Like you're like, yeah, man, that anticipation is something I love because it's the closest thing or one of the closest things you get to feeling like a kid at Christmas.
100%. You know what I mean? And that's what sports is about, is like keeping that, childlike enthusiasm. And so, we all want to hold on to that as long as we can. So it's, I'm with you. And I think especially as we get closer to training camp, we get closer to actual NBA basketball. I think it's just going to keep building and building. We're kind of in that time frame now where, over the next month or so, we will start to see that build up. We'll start to have more previews and it's going to feel very real, very quickly here, that we'll be right back in the middle of that NBA season. But Adam, this has been a fun podcast, man. We went basically a full hour on this, just shooting the shit. We went from topic to topic. I really enjoyed it though, man. I had a great time on this podcast.
It's good to be back, baby. What it do, baby?
Let's go. Appreciate you all for listening in. Make sure, as always, you're following us on YouTube, on across all of our social medias. Make sure you're following Adam Taylor at Adam Taylor NBA. Follow us everywhere you can. We appreciate the love, and we will catch y'all later. Peace.
Bye-bye.